What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, arm yourselves, typology stuff. I am, I'm realizing I don't like communities. It's crazy when human beings, bad, come together, they create bad groups. Regardless, we are focusing on typology and the typology community today, and my hatred for the typology community, but not typology, is so intense it's unreal. But we'll start with typology instead of the community. Why don't we join the typology conversation, like the grand critical conversation in literature? It's because the conversation is useless. If you want to make real progress in anything, there are steps. And the conversation, whatever conversation, is not one of them. The first step is context and fundamentals. What are you studying? What are the absolute basics of how it works? Maybe a bit of history. Your next step is what have the prevailing theories been across time? Or, in other words, who in history were the heavy hitters and what did they have to say? What were their ideas about how this thing works? And usually you're going to get a couple of them. These are usually the most effective interpretations of the fundamentals. Now, step 3 is where if one were going to get into the current contemporary conversation, this is where they do it. But typically, if that's what someone does and they stay in the conversation, they get no further. Because at this stage, you should be researching. You take the fundamentals, you experiment with the prevailing historical theories, which, if you're doing this right, will get you only so far, but not in a bad way. They serve mostly as jumping off points. And then you have your own tested understanding to experiment with. Versus if you get into the conversation, essentially what you're going to embed yourself in, and not just in typology, I stress, everywhere, a few contemporary pillars, other people's interpretations that other people have adopted instead of developing their own interpretations. It's hard to do that, right? Because it takes work, it takes thinking. It's so much easier just to take what someone else says and then treat it as gospel so you can feel like you know something without actually having to do anything. And then you shit-fling and you gossip in circles until you get out of the conversation or until you die, right? Because at this point, the topic has stopped mattering. It is the flavor of typical high school bullshit that is present everywhere and in everything. It is the flavor of gossip you want to engage in. It's your gossip platform. That's what we should call it. That's why in literature, you should always go to the text first, not the academics discussing it. But let's say you do avoid the conversation, study for yourself, develop your own understanding. You do that long enough, you enter the advanced typology realm, or advanced whatever other subject realm. Because, contrary to popular opinion, there is no right way to do anything. And if there were a right way to do anything, it wouldn't come from popular opinion. And typology, especially right now, is more art than science. You can learn to use these tools in a million different ways. And if you're trying to get into advanced typology, then you need to tuco this shit. Study or develop the methods that work best for you in the circumstances that work best for you. For example, physical typology is a thing I believe in. However, I use it primarily for identifying NI in other types. Any too by extension, but I guarantee you, with enough work, you could learn to type people based solely on their expressions, but I'm not there. And I probably won't be there. Because that entire system isn't what works for me. The eye movement thing is what works for me. And I incorporate that one element into my system. And it probably sounds like I don't have a system, because I lean into the magical shit, the spiritual shit. We are closer to a greasy, lubed up Enneagram than we are to something as rigid as socionics. But with all these different systems, and especially if you're building your own system, building your own understanding, why does any of this matter? If you can do anything, then how is there a right answer? Why should I study any of them? Or how do I know whether or not I am getting anywhere? The answer is tangible results. Does your understanding and then application of the system of your choosing or your development produce results you want? And with typology, the two most important tangible results for me are predicting another person's behavior, type them, get a read on them, figure out what they're going to do and maybe why they're going to do it, and especially how to deal with them, double especially if they don't know themselves how best someone can deal with them. And then two, are you with this self-knowledge growing stronger? It's kind of like learning kung fu or karate or something. When you're beginning, you are just learning kung fu. But once you reach a certain point, you start learning this specific martial artist's kung fu. You are no longer learning the basics, you are learning someone else's understanding of the basics, their interpretation of the art form. But if you want to get the heaviest results, you develop an understanding and an application that is yours, that you understand, that produces the results you want, that makes you stronger in your way. And the reason I recommend you stay out of the communities and the cultures and the conversations in general is you don't see much of any of that among habitual followers. Have you noticed that the people who are worst at typology are the ones who base their identities around it? Which I'm embarrassed to say I did. And my typology improved when I stopped doing that shit. Right? Because to them, it is not a tool. It is an identity that allows them to feel certain things they want to feel. Whether that is feeling smart or feeling involved, whatever. It is, for them, an answer, not a tool. And it doesn't work. They suck at typology because typology is not the answer, especially if you need it as some kind of point of positivity in your life. That was my biggest mistake when I got into typology. I wanted things to make sense, I wanted to belong, I wanted an answer. And my typology sucked ass as a result. Because typology, in my opinion, is most effective at its ugliest, at its most uncomfortable. It's like using a thermal monocular to look for ghosts via cold spots. You are using this tool to locate something scary you can't with your naked eye. For typology, that doesn't just mean your weaknesses, which most people are already uncomfortable confronting. My typology is shadow focused, because your shadow, using typology to examine your shadow, will make you more uncomfortable than you are probably prepared to feel. Not just noticing that you are, in fact, a bad person, but understanding your vileness, understanding those unspeakably awful parts of yourself. Parts that are so awful, you repress them. You pretend they don't exist. You attack anything that suggests they might exist. I don't just get backlash on my negative videos. I get backlash on my neutral and positive videos. And that confused me for a long time. But I think what that is my saying in passing something that alerts someone to the fact they are not what they think they are, and they are terrified of it. They hate it. And ironically, they might not be at a point of self-understanding. They recognize that's what's happening, even though if they were using typology in a way I deem correct, they would be. I think that's what's happening. And the entire point of typology, in my opinion, is to recognize those sorts of things, to understand them, and then to deal with them. Or if you can't fix them, then at least to be aware of them. If typology for you is just memes and dating advice, ready access to something that will give you an identity because you don't have one, or just people to interact with, that's fine. That is really fine. You can do that. Don't talk to me. Don't try to get me involved with your communities. Don't try to have a conversation with me. Because if you aren't in this school of typology, then there's nothing for us to discuss. My method produces results I want, and I am refining it ever further. I don't want to stop and back up so I can debate an idiot about the definition of TE or about the type of some fictional character. But see, when you get to this point of typology, step 4 comes in, right? Because you don't want to be in the conversation, but you do benefit tremendously from discussing with people in your school. Or not in your school, your name school necessarily, but a shared, naturally, organically developed understanding. Because there's another pattern, weird pattern I've noticed. If someone comes to you with a dumb shit idea once, almost always, almost invariably, all you're ever going to get out of them, if you entertain them, you make the mistake of entertaining them, are dumb shit ideas, one after another. And all it does is prevents you from deepening your understanding, because you are trying to reconcile definitions with dumb shits, with non-people. Example, when, deep cut, but when Saint O'Neill gaveth his advice to young Flea. All this versus discussions you share with other adepts in your chantry, scholars of your school of magic. In those instances, you do have things to discuss. It's like a trade show. You aren't part of some dumb shit community with however many people discussing however many things. You are communicating with 1 to 3 professionals, all with similar skill sets, all working toward the same goals. And those people are rare. When you meet them, cherish them, and you bin everybody else. You get to a point, you know something, or you can know something. And learning it yourself is always going to be better for you than learning it from somebody else. I know that's so difficult and so time-consuming to think and to research things. But if you want to get somewhere, you bite the bullet. Learning to swim without floaties, without someone's leash around your neck guiding you, it's really scary. I know, but you can do it. You should do it. So in summary, If you want to enter the strange advanced typology realm, take what you need from the fundamentals and then develop your own understanding. If you are getting consistent results and understanding yourself better, no matter what method you're using, you're on the right track. And be very careful about engaging in communities. They're going to teach you ideas that are popular, very popular, but aren't going to work or aren't going to work for you. They'll teach you bad habits that you'll have to unlearn. That's what I had to do. And they will actively prevent you from developing a more effective or more personalized understanding or system. Because that's not what's permitted by groupthink. You're using terms wrong. That's not how that works. And if you are susceptible to pressure, which a lot of people are, because, again, ironically, this is something real typology could help you with. Real typology can help you deal with pressure susceptibility. But if you're in one of these communities, you're going to stay susceptible to pressure because you are being pressured not to develop a tolerance for pressure. It's like this whole, like, dudes not being allowed to box for fun or not wanting to box for fun thing. You are pressured not to learn to deal with pressure. In the same way, you are pressured not to develop any real knowledge of yourself to stay socially acceptable, both in your society and in your little community, when the whole point is to examine and figure out how to deal with the parts of yourself that do exist, that are there, and that will take over at a bad moment, because you are a fragile, or your body is a fragile container for a number of systems. Your identity, your consciousness that you place so much importance on, is just one little component in this container, and all these other parts that you aren't aware of because they are not socially acceptable to examine are going to take over at a bad moment, and you are not going to know how to deal with them. All because even discussing the possibility they might exist is not socially acceptable and freaks other people out. Because then they, if you improve yourself, you understand yourself in any meaningful way, you're confronting people with the fact there are parts of themselves they don't want to look at, that they don't want to know anything about. It's a big mess. Avoid those fuckers. Burn them all. Go solo, get weird, get ugly, get better. And it's been months since we've done typology videos. Here's one. We have 2 more with notes ready to go. Hopefully in the next couple weeks I will get those 2 out. And those are going to be really ugly. Really uncomfortable. Look forward to them. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.